Welcome back to the virtual hangar. Today I'm going to show you everything you need to know to get started with macrame so you can make this cool wall hanging. This project is going to be kind of a long one, so let's go ahead and get started. Your kit will include one wooden dowel. It's about a foot long. I think it's a 1/2 inch dowel. 16 strands of this cotton macrame cord. Each strand will be about 3 yards long. One strand of the macrame cord that is a little bit shorter that we're going to use to hang your wall hanging. You will also need a good pair of scissors. So to get started, we're just going to attach that shorter strand of the macrame cord to the dowel by just tying a double knot around it. You just want it to be nice and tight on the dowel. This is what you're going to use to hang your project. I would also recommend hanging it to work on it from a doorknob is a good idea, or if you want to put a thumbtack up, that would be fine. It'll just be easier to work on if you're hanging. So let's get started on the knots you need to know. The first knot is called the lark's head knot, and this is how we attach our cord to the dowel to work on it. So what you're going to do is fold your cord exactly in half and then pull it through the loop just like that, just until it is tight around the dowel. So again, we're going to take our cord, fold it exactly in half, wrap the loop around the dowel, and pull the two ends of our cord through the loop to attach the cord to the dowel. Alright, there we go. The next knot we are going to do is the square knot. If you ever did Girl Scouts or something, you probably know this knot. Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts. I don't know if they make friendship bracelets in Boy Scouts, but they do in Girl Scouts. So what you're going to do is take the right hand string, put it behind the two middle strings, take the left hand string, pull it to the front of the strings, and then pull it tight. That's the first half of our square knot. And then we're going to take and do the exact opposite. So we're going to take our right hand string, put it in front of our two middle strings, take the left hand string and pull it through the back, pull it through the right hand string, and then tighten it to make the square knot. It's basically like a double knot or a shoe tying knot, but you are doing it around the two cords in the middle. The next knot that we are going to learn is the double half hitch knot, which is a little bit tricky. We do it around one of the strands, usually the left or rightmost strand. You pull the next cord up and over and do the first half of the knot, which really isn't much of a knot at all. You're just kind of wrapping it around, but then when we pull it up and do the exact same motion again, the second time, it becomes a knot. You can see how the cord wraps up, over, and in between the two strands there. I'm going to show you this one a couple times because it is a little tricky because the first half doesn't feel like a knot at all. But you just do the same exact motion twice, and that is what gets you the double half hitch knot. Obviously, all of your macrame cord is going to be the same color, but I did paint these strands. I was hoping it would make it a little bit easier to be able to see what was going on while I taught you these knots. And one more time. Here we go. So you can see how my purple strand that was all the way on the left ends up being all the way on the right. And we get this kind of nice row of, that's 3 double half hitch knots that are nice and round. It's kind of like a traveling stitch. So the other cool thing about the double half hitch knot, that's the one on the left hand side. We can also do it going back the other way. So we're going to take the purple and do it the same way. But we're going to up and over and go to the right this time. And then we're going to do the same thing, up and over and through on the right. And that will give you the double half hitch knot. So I'm going to do a couple more because these are a little tricky. The other thing about all of these is I would recommend You can jump back and forth throughout the video. You can pause and rewind and play it again if you are lost. If you don't tie the knots super tight, you can practice them a couple times on your dowel. That might be a good idea, but you will get plenty of practice doing all of these knots in the project that we're going to do. So the last one, up and over to the right, up and over and through to the right, and that is our double half hitch knot. So the next knot that we are going to do is the spiral knot, and this is actually pretty easy. It's almost identical to the square knot, except that it's just the first half of the square knot. So we take the right strand, put it in back, the left strand, put it in front and through, and tighten it, and that's the spiral knot. Now, it doesn't look like much now, but after you do a bunch of them, eventually it starts to kind of spin around the two central cords there, and it makes a nice, pretty spiral. Definitely, if you are in Scouts, you know this knot. But it's just like the first half of the square knot. And that's all we need to know. So to get started, go ahead and tie on all 16 of your cords into lark's head knots onto the dowel, and then we're going to do a row all the way across the top of square knots. So you can see the first one here. I am going to tie slowly in each of these sections. I'm going to do the first knot slow so that you know exactly which knot I'm doing, and then I'm going to speed the video up so that you don't have to watch me do this for 4 hours. So just a row of square knots all the way across the top of the dowel. You can see how you take sections of 4 cord at a time and do them around the middle 2 to tie your knots. Hopefully the fast motion isn't so fast that you can't see what I'm doing, but I am trying to make the video a watchable length because the project does take a long time. But I kind of like it. It's a little bit meditative to do the macrame. So after we do our first row of square knots, we're going to do another row. We're actually going to make a triangle out of square knots. So we're going to take the rightmost 2 of the first knot and the leftmost 2 of the next knot and tie those 2 together. You can see they're a little bit clearer. And tie those in a square knot, and we're going to just do that same thing in a row all the way across, and that will give us our second row of square knots. There we go. And square knot. Like I said, by the end of this project, you will be an absolute pro at all of the knots that you have to make because you're going to make them all a lot. Because that's all that macrame is. It's tying a bunch of knots in a decorative way so that it makes a pretty piece of art. So same thing here. The leftmost 2 of the first knot and the rightmost 2 of the first knot and the leftmost 2 of the next knot. And we're just tying them in rows so that we make a nice triangle of square knots. Kind of the finesse of this project comes from how consistent you are in your tension of tying the knots and how much space you leave in between each knot. I'm having a little bit of difficulty because I am doing it on a table, but I did that so that it wouldn't be as there wouldn't be as much motion back and forth as I was tying the knots because I knew I would be doing it in fast motion. Okay, so then next thing we're going to do is make a row of double half hitch knots. We're going to do them at an angle here. So what I'm actually going to do is take our anchor piece. This was the purple strand in the examples. And I'm actually just going to tie kind of a placeholder double knot or a single knot, just like a shoelace knot around this middle strand, just so I know where I'm going and so I don't have to worry so much about making the tension on the double half hitch knots exact. You see how that kind of makes the chevron there? So we're going to do that all the way across on the left side. Go up and over and pull down. And then second time, up and over and through. That makes our double half hitch knot on the left side. And you're going to do that with every strand between the one you just did and the one in the very middle that we tied the anchor to. So we're going to go all the way down and across. And of course, if you're hanging, it'll be easier to get consistent tension across all of the hanging pieces. You'll have an easier time making this nice and even and ultimately flat. Doing it on a flat surface is a lot more difficult, but again, I didn't want the dowel to be wiggling back and forth a bunch throughout the whole video. So we are just going to do the same thing on the left side. I tied the anchor to the middle there, and just gonna tie a bunch of these double half hitch knots. Again, if you have trouble, please go back to the beginning of the video and watch the knots as many times as you need to. And then I just tie the two middle pieces together in a double knot. Not exactly a square knot. Okay, then I'm going to take the first 4 on the left and start by tying the first half of the square knot. I'm going to do a row of spiral knots. So this is one spiral knot, and I'm actually going to end up doing it 10 times with these same 4 strands. So that's 2 spiral knots. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I can't count that fast, but here I am counting them. That's 10, and you can see the nice spiral. It looks like DNA. It's kind of cool. So then you take the next 4 strands and do the exact same thing, and then we're going to continue in that same way, doing 10 spiral knots every 4 strands all the way across the piece until we have a whole nice triangle here of spiral knots. Almost there. For the spiral knots, it doesn't matter which 4 strands you start on. You could have gone right to left, left to right. But the double half hitch, you do have to do the left side and then the right side. So there we go. Got all of our spiral knots done. Then we are going to do another row of double half hitch knots. This time I'm not tying the anchor because we're just doing it right under the spiral knots. It's a little bit easier when you're leaving a gap of loose cord to use the tie it in an anchor. But I'm just going to do this double half hitch all the way across the bottom of these spiral knots. And don't worry too much about grabbing the exact right cord. Just grab the next one that comes natural, and you'll find that that works perfectly fine, and then they're still in order. So I went all the way across those 4, and then now I'm going all the way across these 4 with the opposite side of the double half hitch knot. And again, remember, you can go back to the beginning of the video and double watch it again just in case. And then I tie it in a nice double knot right there in the center, just to tie those 2 sides together. Then I'm going to leave a little bit of space, and I'm going to make a V of square knots. So I'm going to start this first knot here, and it doesn't really matter exactly how much space you leave in these gap parts. The part above the spiral knots and then this part here. I do about 2 inches both times, 2 or 3 inches, but you should have enough extra cord that it doesn't matter if you use a little bit less or a little bit more. So to make the square knot into a V of square knots, we're going to actually take the right 2 cords of the knot we just tied and then the next 2 cords and use those 4 cords to make the square knot. It's a little bit easier to see what I'm talking about rather than just listen. But if we keep going in that manner, taking the right 2 cords of the previous square knot and then the next 2 cords in the series, you can make a nice V of square knots. And then we'll do the same thing on the other side, tie a square knot, and then take the left 2 cords and the next 2 to the left and make our square knot. Then we can make a nice V of square knots. Here we go. And after we've got our V of square knots done, we can go ahead and move on to the final row, I believe, of double half hitch knots. And I am gonna go ahead and tie the anchor knot this time because I do want that spacing to be really consistent. So just tie a single knot around one of the center ones just to anchor your your anchor piece. And then go ahead and do the row of double half hitch knots. You should be pretty good at these by now. This is our third or fourth time doing them, I think. Up and over, and then we'll go up and over again and through. Alright, and then we're just going to do that same thing all the way across. And you can kind of fiddle with yours to get better spacing, but again, if yours is hanging off the back of a door or a push pin or a doorknob or something, you'll have a much easier time making your spacing consistent. So then we're going to do the same thing to the left, or to the right, sorry. Another row of double half hitch knots, and then that will be just about the end of our piece after we tie those in a double knot. There we go. Now, finally, I think one of the most fun steps, we are going to take our scissors and trim these cords into a V. It's almost like giving a haircut. If you've never given a haircut, it's kind of fun. But if no one's willing to let you give them a haircut, then this is kind of a fun alternative. So just cut them nice and even in a V going up, and then do the same thing on the other side. You want to make sure your cords are laying flat, like mine are not here, because you'll have a much easier time cutting them, and then they will all be in this consistent pattern of the V. You can see I had a little bit of difficulty doing the cut. Again, it'll be a little bit easier if you have yours hanging from something instead of doing it on a table. It'll make it much easier to determine which order the cords actually go in. And then after we give our piece its haircut, we can go ahead and unravel all of these strands. This part's kind of, it's all optional, I guess, but this part is also optional. If you like the way the cords look, you can just leave them. But if you unravel all of the strands, it kind of contributes to the boho look of the project. So I like to unravel the strands after my last row of knots. Just gives it another extra texture. And also it's kind of fun. And then I give it another haircut just to make sure that everything's nice and even. And there you have it. So if you have questions, please let us know. You can contact us on social media. Again, I would love to see what you make. Please tag us, and I will see you next time.